Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by Tower Electronics. For connectors, cables, and more, call 920-435-2973 or visit pl-259.com. And by Spring Hill Suites, Dayton, South Miamisburg, the Hamvention home for Ham Talk Live. Reserve your rooms now at Marriott.com or call 888-850-6391.
It's Ham Radio with Neil Rapp. Here we go. Welcome to Ham Talk Live. Call in, let's talk. Neil's your guy. Ham Talk Live. Here we go on Ham Talk Radio.
Hey, I hope you're having a great day. It's time for another episode of Ham Talk Live. It's episode number 51, DXpedition Logistics with George Nicholson, N4GRN, recorded live on Thursday, February 9th, 2017. I'm your host, Neil Rapp, WB9VPG. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Ham Talk Live. Tonight we'll be joined by George Nicholson, N4GRN. George is the go-to guy for packing up equipment for those big top 10 DXpeditions and handling all the logistics for the trips. And so we're going to take your calls live in just a few minutes. Last week on Ham Talk Live, Joe Eisenberg, K0NEB, was here to talk about as a visit to the new home of the Dayton Hamvention and also talk about the new Bayou Jumper Kit. And if you missed that show, you can listen anytime on demand at hamtalklive.com, or you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, SoundCloud, or just about any podcast service, and also over on YouTube. I do want to remind everybody that next week is School Club Roundup Week, and I'm in a good mood today because we got our antenna back up finally, and got everything up and running, and we just got a couple of little things to fix, and we can get through School Club Roundup with where we're at. So I'm excited about having the stepper back up and getting on the air next week with the kids. And so give us a call, give these schools a call. They'll be on all week, Monday through Friday next week. Be a lot of activity between 14,250 and 14,280. And you can see all the recommended frequencies over at the ARRL website. Just look for School Club Roundup on there. And if you want to hear more about School Club Roundup, go back in the archives on Ham Talk Live. We did a show back in October with Lou in 2RQ. And I know he's going to be on as well. So hopefully you guys can get on School Club Roundup next week, and there will be a little feature from Lou on Amateur Radio Newsline, which came out just a little bit ago, actually. Came out a little early, so you can check that out as well. All right, well, get your questions ready to go on how all these DXpeditions get all that stuff to the middle of nowhere. And after we do a little interview with George, you can call us. The telephone number to call is 812-NET-HAM1, 812-638-4261, or you can give us a call on Skype. That's where we're at, and that's at Ham Talk Live. You can send a question via Twitter as well. If you've got mic fright, our Twitter handle is at Ham Talk Live. You can catch us there too. So I'll be back with George right after this word from Tower Electronics right here on Ham Talk Live. This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you in part by Tower Electronics. Tower Electronics has been the Ham's dime store since 1978. When you need connectors, mobile and handheld antennas, cables, or adapters, visit Scott or Jill at a Hamfest near you. Or you can order online at pl-259.com or call 920-435-2973. Stock up on those supplies like PL259 and N connectors, SMA adapters, audio cables, soldering supplies, mobile antennas, and ham sticks. Their silver-plated N connectors are even used on the International Space Station. Tower Electronics carries MFJ, Comet, Daiwa, OPEC, Workman, and Ham Pro products. And don't miss their 0% off sale going on now. Tower Electronics, online at pl-259.com, proud to sponsor this episode of Ham Talk Live. Thanks once again to Scott and Jill over at Tower Electronics for sponsoring the show tonight. And help bring you Ham Talk Live each week. They're at the Orlando Hamcation this weekend. And then they'll be in Dalton, Georgia on February 25th and Cave City, Kentucky on March 4th. Or give them a call, 920-435-2973, or visit their website, pl-259.com, and mention Ham Talk Live. They'd like to hear that. Ham Talk Live is on the air every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time at hamtalklive.com. And if you miss the show, all you got to do is go to hamtalklive.com and pull it up, or go to one of those podcasting websites as well, and chances are we're there. George Nicholson, N4GRN, became a ham in 2003. George is a commercial contractor for both general and electrical projects and specializes in adaptive reuse, historic renovations at nightclubs and restaurants, and structural restoration. So George put his contractor skills to work in ham radio by taking care of the logistics for many of the major top 10 needed DXpeditions. He's also gone on several of those DXpeditions to islands like Peter 1, Desecheo, Navassa, Malpelo, and South Orkney, Antarctica DXpeditions himself. He lives in Fairburn, Georgia with his wife Kim, and in addition to ham radio, George does did a lot of caving and climbing, backpacking, skydiving, and camping in the past, and now he's doing some cooking and raising some exotic plants, so we may have to get into that. His homepage is at george-nicholson.com. So, George, thank you for coming on the show tonight.
It's a pleasure to be on tonight.
Well, we want to talk about some of these exotic trips. The DXpeditions, you've worked with Bob Alphin and Glenn Johnson and Craig Thompson and a bunch of these guys that put together these big-time trips. And trying to pack is what we want to talk about tonight. You have the daunting task of trying to put together all this equipment and make sure you've got everything you need over there, and not too much, because you got to pack it all and send it all and get it over there in the middle of nowhere. So tell us how you go about preparing for one of these DXpeditions.
Well, the first one that I was involved in was the Peter the First trip. It was my first DXpedition. I'd only been a ham for 2 years. I ended up on the team and was asked to handle a lot of the logistics for the project. And it turned out that I handled everything in the end, as far as packing and containerizing and getting everything to South America, onto the island, packed up and brought back to the States. In the process of doing that the first time, I spent a number of hours researching every possible thing that we could need while on the island. I prepared an Excel spreadsheet that had 18 individual pages, and each page had anywhere from 20 to 300 line items. And once that was compiled and I felt that I had a pretty good idea of what was needed, for example, the radio tab would have all of the radio equipment, the transceivers, the amplifiers, bandpass filters, everything that actually was part of the radio table setup was in that first tab. Antennas, coax was on a second tab. Once I got those set up, I passed them out to the various team members in charge of each category. Jerry, W9BZ, has helped a lot with the antennas, he and Ralph, so they would tweak the antenna list. Craig, Bob Alf, and Glenn would tweak the radio and amplifier list. So after each list was tweaked, I would clean it up, send it out again. Once we got everything complete on the list, the next thing we do is we start assigning box numbers, which is where my work really comes in. We generally have everything shipped to Atlanta. We'll have it in a large storage building, and every item is put into a box. The boxes are put into larger boxes. Sometimes the larger boxes are 3 foot by 3 foot square, cubed, and every box that size is assigned a number. A pallet will be assigned a pallet number. And every item is listed as to what box and what crate or pallet the box is in, so that we know exactly where every piece is. That takes a considerable amount of time to inventory every item and exactly where it is in every box and every crate. It's a real intense task, takes a lot of time. We're very fortunate here with the SEDXC Club in Atlanta. A number of the club members have worked with Bob and I on the weekends, preparing, for example, we'll take the stepper antennas and assemble every one of them to make sure we've got all the components, to make sure everything is fitted properly. Then we disassemble it, package it back up, number the package, inventory the package, and we do that with everything. Craig takes all of the transceivers and amplifiers, burns those in, tests those. So everything is tested before we go, and then once it's signed off on, it's put into a container and stored until we actually get ready to package the shipping container. It's a rather intense process.
Yeah, that's very intense. So, do you have any numbers on like how long that takes and how much stuff you have to pack for that?
Yeah, we generally start. For example, Bouvet. We are beginning to start working on the list now. Ralph has had the list for a while, and I've had the list. Bob's got it. Glenn's got it. We are working on various components and putting it together now for Bouvet, which is coming up this time next year. So a year ahead, we start actually acquiring materials and deciding how we're going to ship. Once we've got the list pretty well tweaked, we know who's donating equipment, what equipment we're taking, how many stations we're setting up. At that point, I start thinking about the actual shipping and logistics. I start researching pricing from the various ship lines, start talking to various customs agents in the U.S. and South America or New Zealand, depending on where we're shipping to. And that takes 3 or 4 months to acquire. There are portions at time that I get involved with, such as arranging for the fueling for the ship when it arrives at port, arranging for the pilot ships when they come in. That's all worked through the customs agents in South America and New Zealand. So I get to move from the packaging into those other areas about halfway through the actual inventorying and packaging of the merchandise before it leaves the States. The line items, for example, the Amsterdam list I was looking at yesterday, there was 1,042 individual line items on the customs list. Each of those line items has got a box number, a crate number, a weight, a size, who was responsible for getting it to the container, whether it's completely packaged or whether there's parts needed. All of that's in the inventory list, along with a cost for customs and a weight, so that when we get ready to set up the helicopter sling loads, we know how much each box weighs, so we don't have to physically weigh boxes on the ship before we take sling loads to the island. So it's a lot of items. The 142 items may not be individual items. One item could well be interface boxes for the rig. Well, the interface box would have a USB cable, possibly a serial cable, a RGA cable. That could be a number of cables that are in that one line item. So it's really more than 1,042 items that were there, but that's the breakout that we had. For example, the plastic bag would hold all of those cables. So one line item might have 10 individual items in it. And it's critical that we know which box every item is in, because if customs decides to open up a box in the container at the port and the box does not have what's on the inventory for that box, then it leaves them with possibly opening up a lot of containers. And you really don't want that to happen. You start worrying about items disappearing or getting damaged, not being properly stored back. So you've got to make sure, I try to make 100% sure that every box has got exactly what's on the inventory in it.
Wow. That's a lot of work. And of course, you've got the rigs and the antennas and the supports and the interfaces and all that. What about living arrangements? Or are you taking care of all the shelters and food and water? Do you do that too? Or you have somebody else that does that?
Well,
it's broken
down. It's broken down. There's a lot of help involved. For example, the Bouvet trip, Glenn Johnson, W0GJ, he's been doing most of the research on shelters this time. He and Ralph, and we're still looking at shelters. It's sort of a joint effort. We all talk about it. We run things by each other. But Glenn has been doing most of the phone calling on shelters this time. We're looking at some shelter options for this trip. Previous trips, Ralph had actually bought the shelters, had shipped them to Atlanta. We built the floor systems for the shelters here in Atlanta. And the rigs, but like I say, the rigs are, I guess the last two trips, Craig has dealt directly with the manufacturers on the rigs and has had those shipped direct to his location where he burns them in, then he ships them to me, and we package them up into Pelican cases. What I try to do is take a station, a complete station, and put in one Pelican case. It would generally have a K3, an amplifier, one or two bandpass filters, all the interface cables needed, and a power supply. We'd have to, that way you could take a Pelican case, you could put it on the floor beside a table, and everything could go on the table and just be put together, and you didn't have to run from table to table looking for cables. A complete station would be in one Pelican case. That also diversifies the load. In the event that you lost a box or a sling had to be dropped from the helicopter because wind was tossing it around and it was too dangerous and the helicopter had to drop the sling, you don't want to lose all of your bandpass filters or all of your patch cables. So everything is diversified into a number of boxes so that you never are out of business if you lose one or two boxes. That's all part of this inventorying and packaging that I do, is make sure that we don't put all of the toroids in one box. We spread them out. We don't put all of the patch cables in one box. That way, like I say, you're not out of business if you lose one or two boxes or a full crate or a full sling load. Same with food, Same with safety equipment. Everything is diversified. And, we have to, when we go on these trips to these islands, we have to take everything. We set up a complete infrastructure to completely support the team for 2 weeks. So we've got shelter, food, medical and safety, sanitation. You've got your shelters, your bedding, and then you've got all of the ham radio stuff, plus the power infrastructure, all of the antenna towers and poles, and it's a massive amount of material. I think we actually had the weights on 2 of the trips, and it was around 18 to 20 tons of equipment packaged that was helicoptered to the island. Peter the First, we had 26 helicopter sling drops each direction. That's a lot of helicopter flights getting material to an island.
And I know that from watching the video and talking to some of the people on the trip that you weren't able to finish all of those coming back quite all at the same time. And that was interesting.
Yes, we actually left the island a few days early because of an impending storm that was coming, a huge storm. And we were down to the last 2 or 3 large boxes were left on the island, along with the helicopter 2-man support crew and Charles Veely, the world's most traveled man, who was on the trip with us. Charles became a real hard-working team member and helped with a lot of the infrastructure building. He just chipped in and helped. So Charles and 2 of the helicopter crew were on the island. The storm rolled in early. The helicopter had to leave them on the island. They were there a number of hours without shelter, without food. It was a little scary and a little interesting, but everything worked out. Got a beautiful picture of Charles and the helicopter crew coming across the flight ramp when they got out of the helicopter on the ship, carrying the American flag with this big smile on their faces.
Oh, I bet. I bet. Yep. So speaking of coming back and unloading, and then you got to take care of all the, things to put the island back the way, it was, with most of these trips. Then you've got all of this stuff that you bring back. So what happens to all these antennas and radios and everything once you're back from one of these trips? Does it go on to the next group of people going out on a trip?
Well, various things happen. Sometimes Elecraft will say if the team members want to purchase the rigs, they can purchase them at a small discount. Or if there are club members that want to purchase them that have been involved and helped a lot. So some of the rigs are sold. Some of them are actually sold pre-expedition. And the manufacturers, especially Elecraft, have been real good about configuring the rigs to the specific needs on the island. And a lot of times those tweaked out rigs are things that some of the big contest guys would like to have. So Craig has bought a number of them. Jerry's bought some. I've purchased one. You have an opportunity to do that. Sometimes the antennas go directly on to the next DXpedition, especially things like the Battle Creek Special. It's always cleaned up and prepared here in Atlanta. When we get back, we clean it up and make sure all the parts are in it and it's good and clean. And we'll hold it sometimes for a month or 2 and then ship it direct to the next DXpedition team. Sometimes it's shipped back and put in storage with the owner. Same things with DX Engineering. We sometimes buy all of their stuff. Sometimes it goes to the next DXpedition. And sometimes we hold it in storage for the next one we're preparing to do. We've still got some Force 12 antennas from Amsterdam that will more than likely be going to Bouvet that have been in storage here in Atlanta. So it's a number of different things that happen. So you have to, when you leave the island, you've got to package all of this stuff back up, and you have to make sure you don't lose parts and you don't damage it, and you try to keep it dry. And it's a task leaving the island and then getting the stuff back to the States. And then when you get back, you've got that task of uncrating it all and cleaning it up and dispersing it to where it needs to go. So it's an ongoing process for about 2 years.
Wow, that's just amazing that you've got all that work to do, but you can't just run out to the local electronics store and pick up a plug.
No, for example, Elecraft would always send a couple of extra boards that not that they have problems with their rigs, but boards that tend to have failures due to static and things like that, and that might damage easier than other boards. They will send replacement boards or send replacement diodes in case we have an electrical storm. I know we lost, I guess it was a couple of ICOM radios we lost due to static electricity building up in a storm one night on a dipole, and it wiped out some diodes in the front end of the rigs during the night. And we fortunately had spare parts and were able to change those out the next day. So you've got to be sort of prepared for those kind of things. And every trip you go on, there's always something new that comes up. We had on Malpelo 2 generators that died due to the heat, and we actually had the tools and some extra parts with us and were able to disassemble the 2 bad generators and put one good one back together. So we try to carry all the tools we could need, all the parts within reason. You've got to weigh all of this extra stuff with how long it's going to take you to get it to the island, how costly it is to buy, and there's a number of things that you just have to juggle around to make sure you don't take too much, but that you've got everything you need.
Wow, there's a lot of preparation into that, and I'm sure we could ask a lot of things that are coming to mind on how all this actually works. So we're going to give you, the listener, a chance to ask. When we come back, we'll start taking your phone calls at 812-NET-HAM1 and look at some tweets. You can catch us over at Ham Talk Live, but we need to take a quick break. But we'll be back right after this message from Spring Hill Suites Miamisburg right here on Ham Talk Live. If you're going to the Dayton Hamvention this year, be sure to join us for a live broadcast from Spring Hill Suites Dayton South in Miamisburg, Ohio on Hamvention Eve, Thursday, May 18th. Ham Talk Live will have a live audience, and we'll put some of our visitors on the air to celebrate the annual migration to Dayton. And if you're still in need of a place to stay, Spring Hill Suites Dayton South Miamisburg still has some rooms available. Just 25 minutes from the new home of Hamvention in Xenia, Spring Hill Suites Dayton South Miamisburg is near the Dayton Mall, shopping districts, and restaurants. Enjoy fast Wi-Fi, an indoor pool, free breakfast buffet, rooms with microwave and refrigerator and sofa, and it's just minutes away from both I-75 and I-675. Reserve your rooms now at Marriott.com or call 888-850-6391. Spring Hill Suites, Dayton South Miamisburg, the Hamvention home for Ham Talk Live.
You're listening to Ham Talk Live with Neil Rapp. Yesterday, my XYL said she'd leave me if I didn't give up ham radio. Over. Join the conversation. Call us on voice with Skype at Ham Talk Live or give us a call at 812-NET-HAM1. That's 812-638-4261. Now, here's more Ham Talk Live.
Welcome back to Ham Talk Live. We're here at hamtalklive.com every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Check out our Facebook page and our Twitter feed. Just search for Ham Talk Live. And thanks to the folks at Spring Hill Suites. If you need a room for Hamvention, give them a call. We're going to be there on Thursday night and have the live broadcast, so I wanted to get that information out to everyone. But right now it's time for your calls. If you have a question for George, give us a call at 812-NET-HAM1. That's 812-638-4261. Or you can Skype us at Ham Talk Live, and you can also tweet at Ham Talk Live as well. And we do have some tweets here, so we'll just go ahead and dig into those. I got a couple of things on my list here still, but let's get to some of these questions that have come in from none other than Dr. Scott Wright, K0MD. He wants to know what's the toughest DXpedition, which one's been the toughest to organize. Was it Malpelo in the heat, or Amsterdam in the middle of nowhere, or one of the Antarctics? And are there any left on your bucket list to organize and operate from? And I think this is a loaded question here, George. It says, who has the loudest signal from your end of the pileup?
I'm sure that's a loaded question. I always we laugh about making sure that I listen for the K0MD carefully. And I've been fortunate enough to contact Scott on several of the DXpeditions. It's really odd how the propagation works on these trips. U.S. can be coming in really strong, and then all of a sudden it's gone. But you never know. The big guys with the big rigs aren't always the loudest sometimes. It's interesting what we get, because we hear much better a lot of times on these remote islands than anybody else does in the big cities and even in the country, because we've got no noise. So hearing is not a problem usually. But I do listen for Dr. Scott. He's one of my favorite people, as I listen for everybody. I think the toughest one that I've organized was actually the Navassa trip. It was tough in that there was so many hurdles to go over with immigrations and customs and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. It was just a constant battle for 6 or 8 months trying to get everything in order so that we had no problems when we got there. And we had some glitches when we got there. We had anticipated them. We knew what to do. It went smooth after we got there, but that was the toughest one, I think, as far as organizing and pulling it off. Peter the First was probably the most serious concern. It was my first was one reason. The other reason is it was a dangerous location. We had to make sure we had everything we needed. We had to make sure we knew where it was. So it was a tough job packaging, and things had to go in last that came out first. And it was a real challenge to package that one. Malpelo, that was split up between the Colombian team and the U.S. team, making sure that we coordinated everything, and Colombia had what they were supposed to have, and we had what we were supposed to have. It was a little bit challenging to make sure that happened. They're all challenges in different kinds of ways, every one of them. The hot locations have got different needs. You've got more water requirements. You've got to worry about generators overheating. You've got to make sure team members stay hydrated. We've got to make sure that we've got plenty of electrolytes on the hot trips so that people don't have electrolyte problems. We almost had a few at Malpelo. We found out into the first week there that the ship that was preparing the food, the chef, could not eat salt at all, so everything he was preparing was being prepared with a salt substitute, which we did not know. And Dr. Gary found out one day that that's why people were having cramps and we ended up getting out a bag of salt and resalting
Oh,
all
my.
of our food as we got it. So,
Wow.
those are the kind of things you don't think about sometimes. And you just have to make sure you've got what you need when those things come up. And the neat thing is these DXpeditions that Bob and Glenn and Ralph put together, the teams are such that we've got a variety of skills, and everybody has input into everything, and we can cover pretty much anything that happens on the trip, and therefore prior to trip, I'm constantly getting feedback. Did you have this on the list? Has this been accounted for? I really enjoy doing it. It's very interesting putting these packages together. Customs and immigrations can be a real challenge, but that's been the worst one was the Navassa trip and Jamaica. Jamaica was just a real hassle. Nice people. And in the end, it was not a problem, but they just had their way of doing it, and it was very difficult.
And any on the bucket list? Any that you still haven't done that you want to do?
Well, my number one on the bucket list since Peter the First has been Desiceo. So I haven't looked for the next bucket list yet. I had been looking toward Desiceo. Been looking toward Bouvet since Peter the First. I'm sure I'll have a new bucket list, but right now I haven't had time to think about the next one. I've got a lot of preparation to do for Bouvet.
Absolutely, and that's coming up just a year away, and we look forward to that. We do have another tweet from Eric into KOJ, and he wants to know what your favorite DXpedition was and what's your most memorable contact while operating on a DXpedition.
Okay, those are good ones. I guess the favorite, my most favorite DXpedition, that's really hard. I don't know that I have a favorite. Peter the First maybe, because it was my first and it was a big challenge. And we met a lot of very interesting people on the way there and on the way back. I think it's probably the one I remember the most, but they're all unique in their own way. And a big part of these large trips is the camaraderie of all of the people involved, not just the team, but the unique people that you meet in the Antarctic, the unique people you meet with the shipping companies, like the Braveheart crew, the DAP crew that took us to Peter 1. It's just so many facets to it that it's really hard to say what the favorite is. And as far as the most memorable contact, again, that's hard to say. When I sit down at the rig and I've got my 3-hour shift, it's gone before I know it. You get into a zone of just listening for call signs, and there are times that I contact friends and don't even realize I've done it until I'm off the air, and somebody says, do you remember talking to K0MD, for example? I think I made a contact with Scott. I believe it was maybe Desiceo, and I didn't even realize I was talking to Scott at the time. I was just as rapidly as possible knocking them off the list as they were coming in. But I think maybe some of the guys that I remember that in my first 1 or 2 trips that I had heard so much about, like Marty Lane and some of those guys, I remember my first contact with them from Peter the First or from Desiceo. But I don't have a favorite contact, I don't guess. I know a lot of people do, but I really don't.
Okay, and Eric follows up with, how about just as a ham operator in general anywhere? Do you have a most memorable contact ever?
Most memorable contact ever? Yes, I do. I had back in high school and college, I wanted to be a ham, but I had nobody living close to us. I could not learn the Morse code by myself, so I never got my license. I had been prepared to pass the written test. I had built all the Heathkit stuff. And I remember when I got my ticket, I got my novice ticket first. I was getting ready to go in for open heart surgery the next week. And my first contact was on, I think it was 50, 6 meters. And it was to Newfoundland. And that was my first contact ever on ham radio. Well, I had just purchased a home in Nova Scotia about a month before that. Turns out the contact in Newfoundland was a very good friend of one of the fishing families I knew in Nova Scotia, and I met him the next year when I went up and gave the presentation on Peter the First. So I well remember that. I don't remember his call sign now. He's passed away. He was an old gentleman, but he was a Newfoundland guy, and I made that first contact on 6 meters. That's probably the one I remember the most.
All right, very good. Well, we just have a couple of minutes left, so if you want to tweet us, it's at Ham Talk Live. We've got time maybe for one quick call at 812-NET-HAM1. If you want to get that in, you need to do that right away because we're just about out of time for this evening. But one of the things, and I actually was asking about this before the show, since we just got our stepper back up at school today, and I remember all the work that it took to get it put together and drill out the poles and route those out and all the shrink wrap and everything to get all that going. What exactly do you do a little differently with those so that you can get those poles collapsed again after you test everything, put everything together, so that you can pack those up and get them out and put them back?
Well, we take them all apart as we do everything and assemble them here in Atlanta and test them to make sure they're working properly, make sure the control cables are all working properly, and then we disassemble and put back together. But, for example, the shrink wrap we do not use. We use the really good all-weather 3M electrical tape to tape those tubes together with. We've never had a failure with it. It's not your regular Scotch 33 3M. It's a much more expensive professional grade tape that we use to put them together with. They keep it completely dry. It doesn't get really hard in cold weather. It doesn't melt in hot weather. So that's what we do with the steppers. And you don't tape the control cables. You don't use tape to tape those together. You put them together with zip ties. The tape gets all sticky in hot weather, and you've got everything sticking to it. So we try to keep everything clean and packaged neat, and everything is tested at least once before it leaves for the container.
Very good, George. Well, I've got more questions I could ask, but we're out of time, and I just thank you so much for giving us some insight on, how to pack all this stuff up. And we think, making a little go kit's a little tough, and this is the ultimate go kit here we're talking about. So thanks for all your work that you've done on these to make these trips possible, and thanks for sharing all that information with us tonight, and look forward to maybe having you come on again maybe after the next trip or leading up to the next trip, and give us some more insight.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, and be glad to come on anytime.
All right. Well, that is a wrap for this week's edition of Ham Talk Live. I'd like to thank my guest, George Nicholson, N4GRN, and everybody out there in cyberspace for listening and tweeting in, and invite you back next Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time when Fred K4IU will be here to talk about DXing. And next week we celebrate being on the air for 1 year. So thank you all for listening, and tell your friends about the show. And here's hoping for an even better second year of Ham Talk Live. For a list of all of our upcoming guests, be sure to visit hamtalklive.com. So for now, this is Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, saying 7375, and may the good DX be yours.